Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Okay, so imagine this, a political party, but it's sparked by poetry.
Interesting.
Yeah, and fueled by, just this deep desire for change. And it really captures the spirit of an entire movement.
I like it.
It's the La Raza Unida Party, or LRUP for
It's
short.
LRUP.
And that's what we're going to be diving into today, the story of the LRUP.
It's a fascinating story, really
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, and that podcast episode you picked from Mr. Hutchings History, that's a great place to start.
Oh, good. Why'd you think so?
Yeah, it really sets the stage. Well, we're talking about a very specific moment in time.
Yeah.
Late 1960s, early 70s.
Right. The Chicano movement.
Exactly, the Chicano movement and this movement for Mexican-American civil rights. It was in full swing back then.
Yeah, just a ton of inequalities across the board.
Absolutely, in everything. Education, jobs, housing, you name it.
Yeah, it's interesting, a lot of our listeners might not realize this, but that term Chicano, it was actually reclaimed by activists
Right.
during this era.
Yeah, it was about, really taking ownership of their identity.
Pushing back against being forced to assimilate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where LRUP comes in, bursts onto the scene.
Right. But this wasn't your typical political party,
No, not at all. This wasn't some smoke-filled room
Yeah.
deal. No.
Not at all.
Picture a youth conference, Denver, 1969.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
That's where it all began. Seeds of LRUP were sown right there. Just this incredible grassroots energy.
Wow. And I mean, at the heart of it all, we have Rodolfo Corky Gonzales.
Oh, yeah, Corky Gonzales.
This guy wasn't just some political figure, right? He was a poet, a boxer, a true activist.
Absolutely. And, his poem, I Am Joaquin, that became an anthem.
Oh, yeah.
For the entire movement. It expresses this incredible struggle for identity and recognition.
Yeah, I remember reading that poem in college. Really powerful stuff.
Oh, it's incredible. It really captures that feeling of being caught between two worlds.
Yeah.
You're trying to reconcile your Mexican heritage, but also your American reality.
Right, exactly.
And Gonzales, he tapped into that raw emotion and turned it into a call to action.
So we've got this incredible leader, this movement that's demanding change, and this political party, LRUP, that's starting to emerge.
Yeah.
What exactly were they hoping to achieve? What were their big goals?
They had a pretty comprehensive platform, but there are a few things that really stand out.
Okay.
Increased political representation was huge for them.
Yeah, makes sense.
They wanted to see their communities reflected in the halls of power, right? To have a say in the decisions that were affecting their lives.
Yeah, that's key.
Absolutely. But it wasn't just about politics. They also pushed for things like bilingual education, fair labor practices, an end to discrimination. It was about empowerment on multiple fronts.
Right, reclaiming their cultural heritage and demanding their rightful place in American society.
Exactly.
And from what I've read, LRUP didn't just talk the talk, right? They actually walked the walk.
Oh, yeah, they did.
They won elections.
They did.
And not just like small stuff. We're talking school boards, city councils, even county offices.
Absolutely. They were shaking things up.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and you know where they really found success? Texas.
Texas? Okay.
Yeah, particularly places like Crystal City and Eagle Pass.
I see. So these towns became like LRUP strongholds.
Exactly. And you have to imagine like actually gaining control of local government. That's huge.
Yeah.
This wasn't just voting for someone who might listen to your concerns. This was about taking the reins and implementing change.
Wow, taking control, that's incredible. But it makes you wonder, if they were so successful in Texas, why didn't that translate to other parts of the country?
That's where things get really interesting because LRUP did have a presence in California and Colorado, but they never reached that same level of influence that they had in Texas.
Huh. And the source you shared, it points to a key difference.
Demographics, right?
Yeah, demographic.
The Mexican-American population in those other states, it was much more spread out.
Okay, I see. Yeah, it's harder to build a unified political force when your base isn't concentrated.
Absolutely. Much harder when you're geographically dispersed.
That makes sense. But even in Texas, where they were strong, it seems like it wasn't all smooth sailing, even from the start.
True. Very true. As LRUP grew, cracks started to appear.
Oh, how so?
Well, you had all these passionate individuals all fighting for the same cause, but with very different ideas about how to get there.
Ah, okay, so internal divisions.
Yeah, the classic tale of a movement struggling with its own success.
Were there any specific issues that caused these rifts? What were the flashpoints?
Well, one of the major fault lines was the question of electoral strategy.
Okay.
Some chapters, especially in Texas, they focused on local elections, taking control of community institutions.
Mm-hmm.
But others, like those in Colorado, they favored running candidates for statewide office.
I see. So a difference in approach.
Yeah. And this difference, it caused tension and ultimately hindered their ability to present a united front.
Almost like they had two different parties operating under the same banner.
Right, exactly. And it wasn't just some polite disagreement about strategy either.
Oh, really?
No. The source hints at some real animosity between these different factions.
You can really feel the tension just reading about it.
Oh, yeah. These weren't just differences of opinion. These were deeply held beliefs about the best way to achieve their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And when those beliefs clashed, it led to some pretty bitter rivalries and power struggles.
And to add fuel to the fire, it wasn't just internal struggles they were dealing with, right? They were facing pushback from the outside as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Some Mexican Americans, even those who sympathized with their goals, they felt that LRUP was just too confrontational.
Really?
Yeah, they worried that their aggressive tactics would alienate potential allies
Yeah.
and just make it harder to achieve lasting change.
So they favored a more moderate approach.
Exactly. Working within the system, building coalitions, engaging in dialogue.
Interesting. It really speaks to this dilemma, right? That any movement faces when it's trying to challenge the status quo.
It does.
Do you go for the bold, attention-grabbing move, or do you play the long game, working within the system to try to change it from within?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
And it was a question that LRUP clearly grappled with as they were trying to navigate this really complex political landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's not forget, this was a time of just immense social and political upheaval, right? The fight for civil rights, it was met with fierce resistance, and the Chicano movement was no exception.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a battle of ideas. It was a struggle for power.
Mm-hmm.
And those in power weren't about to just give it up easily.
Right. And the source mentions, harassment from law enforcement.
Oh, yeah, especially the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, they were specifically targeting LRUP members.
They were trying to intimidate them, disrupt their activities, silence their voices.
So not just political opposition, but active suppression?
Oh, yeah, yeah. If you read about the tactics that were used against them, it's clear that they were seen as a real threat by the establishment.
And the 1970 U.S. Commission on Civil Rights report.
Oh, yeah, that report.
It paints a pretty chilling picture.
It does. LRUP members faced intimidation, arbitrary arrests, even violence.
It wasn't a level playing field at all.
No, not at all.
Wow. So we have internal divisions, external pressure, and then active resistance from these really powerful forces.
Yeah.
It's amazing they accomplished anything at all.
It really is a testament to their passion, their commitment to the cause. They were fighting for their communities, for a better future. They weren't going to back down easily.
So they're battling on multiple fronts, facing down some
Yeah.
really serious challenges, but they're still managing to make some headway, especially in Texas.
Right.
But we know that LRUP is no longer a major force in American politics.
Right.
So what ultimately led to their decline?
Well, in addition to the challenges we've already talked about, there was this broader shift happening within the Chicano movement itself.
Okay.
By the mid-'70s, a lot of Mexican Americans began to rethink their approach to political engagement.
Okay.
They started to question whether an ethnically specific party like LRUP was the most effective way to achieve their goals.
So were they moving away from the idea of a separate Chicano political identity?
Not necessarily. It was more about recognizing the limitations of working outside the two-party system.
Okay.
They saw the value in engaging with the Democratic and Republican parties, building coalitions, and advocating for change from within those structures.
So a strategic shift.
Yeah.
Recognizing the need to play the long game.
Exactly.
Work within the system to try to achieve lasting change.
Mhm.
But it's got to be a tough decision, right? To abandon that dream of a truly independent Chicano political force.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue, no easy answers.
Yeah.
But for many, that lure of mainstream politics, with its promise of broader influence and access to resources, it proved just too strong to resist.
So LRUP's flame, It might have burned brightly, but briefly.
Yeah.
But it's clear that their impact went far beyond just election results.
Oh, absolutely. They left a legacy that continues to resonate today, and that's what we'll explore in the rest of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
One thing that really jumps out at me from all this is LRUP's focus on education.
Yeah, they were really passionate about it.
And it wasn't just about like getting more money for schools or building new ones. It was something much deeper.
Yeah, it was truly radical for its time.
Yeah.
They saw education as a tool for social change,
Okay.
a way to empower communities and really challenge those dominant narratives that had, kept Mexican Americans marginalized for so long.
And the source specifically mentions bilingual education, like that was a cornerstone of their platform.
Oh, absolutely. It was essential to them.
And it wasn't just about helping kids learn English.
No, not at all.
It was about valuing their native language and preserving their cultural heritage.
Exactly. They understood that language is tied to identity.
Mm-hmm.
Forcing students to just abandon Spanish. That wasn't just bad teaching. It was a form of cultural erasure.
Wow, that's a powerful way to put it.
They recognized the damage that assimilationist policies had done to generations of Mexican American children.
That's a perspective you don't really hear much in those, mainstream discussions about bilingual education today. It's usually framed as just a practical thing.
Yeah, just a practical matter.
But LRUP, they saw it as a fundamental social justice issue.
They did, and that's what's so fascinating about their approach.
Yeah.
They connected language, culture, and power, and they did it in a way that was really ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm. It's like they were anticipating those multiculturalism debates that would come later.
Yeah, they were.
They were fighting for a system where students could succeed academically, but also feel a sense of belonging, and pride in their heritage.
Exactly, and they didn't stop at language either.
Really?
They wanted a curriculum that reflected the Chicano experience, that told their stories and celebrated their contributions.
It's about representation, right?
Yeah, seeing yourself in the books you read, the lessons you learn, the stories you're told.
Mm-hmm. Feeling seen and valued.
Exactly, and then LRUP understood that education wasn't just about, individual achievement.
Yeah.
It was about community empowerment.
Right, so by winning control of those school boards in places like Crystal City, they were able to actually put these ideas into practice.
They were, yeah. They introduced bilingual programs. They hired Chicano teachers.
Wow.
And they developed curricula that reflected the local community.
That's incredible.
It was a radical departure from the status quo.
And it must have been amazing to see these changes happening.
Oh, it was a testament to the power of grassroots organizing. A reminder that even small groups can make a big difference when they have a clear vision.
But these gains weren't always welcomed, right? The source mentions some pretty strong pushback from those who saw bilingual education as a threat.
Yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, there was a lot of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Some argued that bilingual education would divide communities or that it would undermine national unity.
It's amazing how those same arguments still pop up today.
I know, right?
It really speaks to this deep-seated fear that some people have of cultural change and the lengths they'll go to try to preserve those existing hierarchies.
Yeah, it's a reminder that progress isn't always linear.
Right.
There are setbacks, there are challenges.
And the fight for educational equity is ongoing.
Absolutely.
LRUP might be gone, but that vision of a truly inclusive and empowering education system, that's still as relevant as ever.
I completely agree. We can draw inspiration from their example as we continue to push for a system that serves all students.
So as we move beyond education, it's clear that LRUP's impact, it extended far beyond the classroom, right?
Well, yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, their story, it touches on so many issues that are still relevant today, from political representation to cultural identity to just the question of how to advocate for social change.
You're absolutely right. They weren't just fighting for specific policies.
Right.
They were challenging the very structures of power.
It's incredible how this one party, born from a youth conference, managed to spark such a wide-ranging movement for social justice.
It's pretty amazing.
It's a testament to the power of ideas.
Yeah, it is.
And the courage of those who dared to imagine a different future.
And their legacy lives on,
Yeah.
Not just in the changes they achieved, but in the countless individuals and communities they inspired.
LRUP may be gone, but their spirit, their commitment to social justice, their belief in collective action, that continues to resonate today.
It does.
And their story, It also highlights, the importance of understanding history,
Yes.
not just as a collection of dates and facts,
Right.
but as a living narrative that shapes our present and informs our future.
Exactly. By studying movements like LRUP, we can learn from their successes and their failures.
Yeah.
Draw inspiration from their courage and find guidance for our own struggles for a more just and equitable world.
And speaking of, learning from the past, one thing that really struck me about LRUP was their willingness to challenge the status quo, to be confrontational. They weren't afraid to shake things up.
Yeah, they were.
And, in today's political climate, there's a lot of debate about the most effective way to advocate for change.
There is.
Do you play the inside game, working within the system, or do you take a more confrontational approach?
It's a question with no easy answers.
Yeah.
And LRUP's experience provides valuable insight into both approaches. Their successes in local elections show the power of working within the system to achieve some real concrete gains.
But their decline also highlights the limitations of that approach, right? Especially when you're up against such deeply entrenched power structures.
Right, exactly.
Their story suggests there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
No, there isn't.
It's about finding the right balance,
Yeah.
choosing the tactics that are most likely to work in a particular context.
Absolutely. And it's also about recognizing that social change is a long game.
Mm-hmm.
LRUP's story reminds us that progress isn't always linear.
Right.
There will be setbacks, there will be challenges, and it takes sustained effort, strategic thinking.
And a willingness to adapt to changing circumstances.
Exactly.
And it also highlights the importance of building coalitions, right?
It does, yeah. Finding common ground with those who share your goals.
Even if you don't agree on every single tactic.
Right. LRUP's struggles with internal divisions demonstrate just how important unity is and the dangers of fragmentation.
Yeah, a movement's strongest when it can harness all those different perspectives and talents while staying focused on those core values.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways you want our listeners to remember about LRUP's impact?
Well, to me, the most important takeaway is that LRUP showed the world the power of a community that knows its own history, embraces its culture, and demands its rightful place at the table.
They were a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And their legacy continues to inspire those who fight for social justice and educational equity today.
It's amazing to think about all those ripple effects they created, even though they ultimately disbanded.
Yeah, for sure. Their story, it feels so relevant today.
It does, especially when we're thinking about social movements and activism.
Absolutely. They confronted some tough questions that activists are still grappling with.
Like how confrontational should you be?
Exactly. Yeah. When do you compromise and when do you, stand your ground?
And the source material mentions that, they faced criticism,
Okay.
even from some people within the Chicano movement itself, for being too radical.
Right. Too aggressive.
But then again, they accomplished a lot, by refusing to play by the establishment's rules.
Yeah. It's that classic dilemma.
It is.
Working within the system versus disrupting it.
Right.
LRUP story shows there's no easy answer. No single right way to create change.
And context matters so much.
It does.
LRUP was operating in a very specific time and place.
Right.
The Chicano movement, it was gaining momentum, but they were also facing this intense pushback
Absolutely.
from those in power.
It makes you wonder, how their tactics might have evolved if the political landscape had been different.
Yeah, what if they had bridged those internal divisions?
Right. Or what if they had built stronger alliances with other, progressive groups?
Could they have accomplished even more?
Yeah, maybe. Or would those compromises have diluted their message?
Right. Their commitment to that distinctly Chicano political identity.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
It really highlights the challenges that any movement faces when it's, trying to carve out its own space to maintain its unique voice, but then also seeking to broaden its appeal.
Yeah, you got to strike that balance.
You do.
And it's not just about internal dynamics either.
Right.
The source material also talks about all those external pressures they faced.
We did touch on the harassment from law enforcement.
Yeah, but it went beyond that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. There were attempts to discredit them in the media.
Oh, wow.
To paint them as this dangerous fringe group to sow fear and division within communities.
A reminder that, any movement that challenges the status quo is going to encounter some fierce resistance.
Well, absolutely. Power concedes nothing without a demand, right?
Right.
And LRUP's demands, they were seen as this direct threat.
To those in power?
Yeah, to those who benefited from the existing power structures, they were disrupting the narrative, challenging those assumptions that had kept Mexican Americans marginalized for so long.
It really underscores the point that social change is rarely smooth or straightforward.
No, it's messy, it's unpredictable, it's full of, twists and turns.
It takes resilience, adaptability, a willingness to learn from your successes and your failures.
LRUP might not have achieved all their goals, but they left a mark on the political landscape.
Yeah.
They did. They paved the way for future generations.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are, the most important lessons we can take away from LRUP's story? What can their experience teach us about how to create change today?
Well, I think first and foremost, it demonstrates the power of grassroots organizing.
Oh.
They show that even a relatively small group of dedicated individuals can make a real difference.
Yeah.
Especially when they're, rooted in their communities and connected to a shared vision.
Their story's a reminder that change doesn't always start at the top.
Right.
It often starts at the bottom, with ordinary people coming together.
Absolutely. And I think LRUP also highlights how important cultural pride and identity are.
Okay.
As a driving force for social change. They understood that feeling connected to your history, your language, your culture, it can be really powerful.
It can be. It can be a source of strength and motivation.
Exactly. And their story encourages us to embrace our own unique identities.
To celebrate our differences.
Yeah, and to use those differences as a source of power and solidarity.
And lastly, LRUP's story, it reminds us that social change is a marathon.
It is. It's not a sprint.
It requires patience, perseverance,
and a willingness to adapt.
It's a message of hope and resilience that still resonates today.
It does. It inspires activists and organizers all over the world.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay, I like it.
What can you learn from LRUP's story, and how can you apply those lessons to the challenges you see in your own community, in your own life? Yeah. How can you use your voice, your skills, your passion to contribute to the ongoing struggle for a more just and equitable world? That's
a powerful question, and one that I hope will stay with our listeners long after this episode is over.
Because ultimately, this fight for social justice, it's a collective effort.
It is.
It requires all of us to do our part.
To step up, to speak out, to demand change.
And LRUP's story, it reminds us that even small actions can have a ripple effect.
They can.
Contributing to a larger movement for positive change.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of the La Raza Unida Party.
It's been a privilege to explore their story with you.
It has, and we hope it's sparked your own curiosity about this fascinating movement.
And we hope you'll join us next time for another deep dive into the stories that shape our world.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.